everybody. Hello, Amy, all the way from the US. It's a lovely day to have you with us here today and talking about all about women's health. And as usual, it's a huge fan moment for me to be able to talk to you after being, for being your huge fan on Twitter since a while. And thank you so much for joining with me here today for this whole webinar series where I'm trying to talk all about health, nutrition. We've had the good honor of having Dr. Ted Neiman, Professor Tim Noakes with us. And of course, Marika, completely is another huge fan following, Amy. I must say that.
Well, thank you so much. I mean, you've just listed some of my favorite people and people that really inspire me and have taught me a lot. So this is just an honor to be among that company. And it's so, I love that I reach an international audience. I mean, like you said, here I am in North Carolina on the East Coast of the US and you're all in India and it's
absolutely
evening for you. It's just late morning here. And so, wow.
Absolutely. And so for all of those who are, we are doing this live and we have attendees on who'll be watching you. And in the end, I'll just invite a couple of very special and close friends of mine who are also working on the same issues on which you are working and I'm working on in India. And so for all the people who are watching us just now, let me do a short introduction about Amy. Though, of course, I mean, whatever I say, words are less for her. But Amy is a US Air Force veteran. She's a certified nutrition specialist, and she is working very consistently and heavily in the field of low-carb nutrition and the keto diet nutrition. And she believes in the motto that real people need real food. And also I just love what we are working on, the keto without the crazy.
That's the better one.
And of course, we all know that you've had those awesome books about Alzheimer's, which we'll also be talking about. And your book, the Stall Slayer, it's been released, right?
Yes, right now it's a PDF ebook, but sometime in the next few weeks it'll be available on Amazon, and it will be available internationally eventually in a paperback or for Kindle.
Right. So basically, Amy is working heavily in the field of women's health and mental health, and these are the two fields which India, I must say, Amy, we are facing a huge issue with both these things currently. Women are, I think, somehow in our country, I've seen women are, the prime sufferers because. They are just not able to understand the kind of nutrition their body needs right since the time they are teenagers, since the time when they are expecting, they are pregnant, and right till our ages when they are premenopausal, menopausal, and postmenopausal. And the health of women above the ages of 40 in our country, I can tell you, is a mess. And I just feel so sorry to see that what a kind of situation is happening only thanks to the poor nutritional guidelines. What have these guidelines done to the health of women at large? The high carb, the low fat, and I don't know why this compelling belief that for women protein is not necessary. So it's I hear that every single day that I don't need the protein. I don't need the protein. So that is the reason I really wanted you to be here, because it's just so tragic. And because almost above the ages of 35 to 40, most of the women are dealing with such pathetic health. They are unable to become a good role model for their children. They age prematurely. They have all sorts of health issues. And by the age of 50, it's like the health span is completely gone. It's just they're living, it's not a productive life at all. So
and it's much harder to come back from that than to prevent it from happening in the first place. It's much harder to reclaim health if you've lost it than to just keep it,
Oh yes. So please, we all welcome you, Amy, to this webinar. And most of us are your huge fans, and let me start by asking you a little about your own journey. I mean, Air Force veteran, and then moved into writing books and blogs, and you have your own To It Nutrition where you are hand holding and guiding everybody. How did it all start? What exactly has your journey been like?
Right. Well, my story is similar to many people's stories in that I haven't always been a nutritionist. I changed careers as I was a little bit older. I used to be heavier, and I never had morbid obesity. I wasn't quite that, large, but I was carrying a lot of extra weight despite exercising. I wasn't afraid of exercise. I was a runner. Now I was a slow runner, but I kind of like you. I think you were athletic, and it didn't really help our weight at all. I think that I was healthy, and I would say I was physically fit, but my physique, I still was carrying a lot of extra body fat, and I was eating my healthy whole grains and the fat-free milk on my cereal and doing all the things I thought I was supposed to do. And I spent so many years blaming myself and feeling like it was my failure. What am I doing wrong? I just have to work harder. Never mind that I had friends who ate junk all the time, who never exercised, that were smaller than I was. Well,
Yes.
long story short, I actually discovered the Atkins diet. That's how I started in all this, was through the Atkins approach. And it was very scary because you all, people don't recognize me without my coffee, but I remember the first time I put heavy cream in my coffee instead of skim milk. And it was so thick and so rich. And I was just wondering, am I going to have a heart attack immediately? Or is this going to take time before it clogs my arteries? And of course, I lost the weight and it worked, and I get to eat the most delicious food. I don't really feel deprived. I will say it didn't stick the first time. I stopped and started low carb about 3 times before I stuck with it for the long term. So if anyone watching out there right now is having trouble staying with it, just keep trying. You'll stay with it when you're ready to stay with it. Don't feel bad if you're not able to just do it the first time. Most people have a hard time starting, but I had been in and out of a lot of jobs that I didn't find fulfilling and I wasn't satisfied by. And I realized one day that there's a career in nutrition. Like I could go back to school, get formal education in nutrition, and actually help other people learn about a low carb way of eating. So that's what I did. And you were mentioning all the different health problems that people have. And of course, it's not just women. Men are affected just as intensely. But after everything I've learned about the mechanisms and the biology of how low carbohydrate or ketogenic diets work, I think now that helping people lose weight is almost the least impressive thing that this does. You can improve your type 2 diabetes, you can improve PCOS, migraines, high blood pressure, skin problems, all kinds of things get better. And as a coincidence, you might also lose some weight. So I certainly don't think everybody needs to eat this way, but this is a very powerful, very effective way of eating for millions of people.
Absolutely, absolutely. And then how was it that you decided to start your To It Nutrition, and what made you write your book? Because Alzheimer's, oh my goodness, it's such a scary entity, and it's so fascinating to know that it's just these wrong nutritional guidelines which can cause a disease like that. So what made you generate your interest in this particular field of Alzheimer's and
Right.
mental?
My book, it's called The Alzheimer's Antidote, and it actually grew out of my graduate school thesis. I had to pick a topic to do kind of a deep dive research on and write a big research paper. And if anyone watching has heard of the book Good Calories, Bad Calories by Gary Taubes,
Mhm.
he has a chapter in that book where he mentions an association between glucose and insulin and Alzheimer's. And I
Mm.
had never heard of that before. And I had already been researching and learning about low carb before I read this book. So when I read that, I said, oh, that's interesting. I've never heard of that before. But I have no family history of Alzheimer's, so it wasn't that compelling to me at the time, but I sort of filed it away thinking that's something I might look at in the future. And so a few years later, when I was in school for nutrition and I had to pick a thesis topic, I said, let me look into that Alzheimer's thing and see, is there even enough research on this? Has this been studied? Are people looking at it? And sure enough, when I started to look in the medical literature and the scientific journals, it was everywhere. If anyone is new to this idea, the reason a ketogenic oriented nutritionist would be looking at Alzheimer's at all is because they regularly call Alzheimer's disease type 3 diabetes or diabetes of the brain. And the main reason for that is that the main problem in the brain of somebody with Alzheimer's is that the brain is no longer capable of breaking down and metabolizing glucose to get fuel. So the brain is basically starving to death. It's an energy shortage in the brain. And to what you said earlier, I just kind of want to clarify, we don't know for sure what the cause is. You know, I think something I would say is when you look at insulin resistance or metabolic syndrome and high blood sugar and insulin, there is no organ or tissue in the body that is not negatively affected by those glucose and insulin problems. So why would we think that the brain would be spared? Why would the brain be protected from the damage that the eyes, the kidneys, the liver, the ovaries, the testes, the skin, that every other part of the body is affected by? Why wouldn't the brain have a problem in that situation? And so they are doing a lot of fascinating research into ketogenic diets for Alzheimer's disease, because we're in the very early stages of the research, but one of the most encouraging things about this is that even though the Alzheimer's brain is not metabolizing glucose properly, it still will take up and use ketones. So at least if the major problem is this fuel shortage in the brain, the ketones can at least make up for some of that fuel. It can't close that gap entirely, but it can at least provide some nourishment for these otherwise starving brain cells.
Because I also feel that definitely before this whole the high carb, low fat, and cholesterol is the enemy, all of these myths started, we had never really heard of Alzheimer's. It's a pretty new disease. And absolutely, I definitely feel that this is what the insulin resistance is doing to the brain. Is just scary, and it's just sad that,
It's, you're exactly right. It was rare. It's not a brand new disease, but it was very rare. Just
very
like type 2
rare.
diabetes goes
Absolutely.
back centuries, but it was very rare.
Absolutely.
So it's certainly like the incidence is exploding, and we have an older population, right? Like we just have a graying elderly population, but younger, just like with type 2 diabetes and non-alcoholic fatty liver, younger and younger people are being affected. So this is no longer a disease of elderly people. People in their 50s and 60s are starting to develop dementia and cognitive decline. So it's not solely like an elderly concern. This is something that starts when you're much, much younger. And it's only when the decline in the brain's ability to use glucose is measurable in people as young as their 30s and 40s. And you don't know there's anything going on because your brain is compensating. But it's only when the damage is so severe and so widespread that your brain can no longer compensate for that. And that's when you start showing the symptoms. But by that time, the disease process has already been there for a long time. And I think that's why it's happening to people younger and younger. It's our diet, it's our lifestyle, and maybe things we haven't even identified yet, but I think we're kidding ourselves if we think diet has nothing to do with it.
Absolutely. And I think also the added use of statins.
I would agree, and I'm not a medical doctor, but the brain is built out of cholesterol. So much of the physical structure of the neurons is cholesterol.
Cholesterol, absolutely.
Yeah, and your own, of course, the body makes cholesterol, but so even if you didn't eat any, like let's say you don't eat any animal foods, your body would still make cholesterol, but these statin drugs reduce your body's internal production. It's just a disaster. And at least in the United States, our regulatory authority, the Food and Drug Administration, has required now warnings on statins that they can cause memory loss and confusion. They know that this causes memory loss.
No, but it's not that they're like this in India. Statins are being prescribed right, left, and center, and it's so difficult to. It's just such a struggle. I can under the kind of struggle even I'm facing. Whomsoever I tell, please stop statin. You must have seen me tweeting all the time. Are you still taking statins? But it's it'll take quite a number of years for us to understand the kind of harm which has been caused.
Yeah, it's they just have so many adverse side effects. It's very there might be some very specific cases where they're beneficial, but I think that there's so many negative side effects that it's just not. It's a very dangerous drug. I'll just say that. I think it's
Absolutely.
dangerous.
Absolutely. So, Amy, the most important topic I would like to ask you about is menopause, because I mean, what how do we manage the all the issues of the menopause, especially weight gain, because all the women are all the time are facing this issue of the weight gain, the water retention, the bloating, the depression. So what are your insights about this? What should we
Yeah.
do about it?
I hope I have it right because I'm going to be 42 next month. So menopause is coming quickly for me. I think obviously menopause is a time of enormous hormonal changes. So the best thing to do is when you're younger, get in the best health and the best, build some muscle mass. The more metabolically healthy you are entering into menopause, the smoother the transition will be. And it will still be difficult. I think even women that are in perfect health and in great shape, it's still a bumpy ride. But I think the hormonal changes just make it much easier to gain weight. They make it more difficult to lose weight. Obviously mood changes can happen, and so I think you have to be even more diligent about your diet and your lifestyle habits at that time. And I think keto is still effective, but I think most women as we age, we find that we do, and this goes to the protein you mentioned earlier,
Yeah.
we can't be quite so generous with all the added fat. And it's not that we have to be afraid of fat. It's still, you're going to consume plenty of fat, but you have to watch the amount of fat, and it's okay to increase protein. And I honestly believe that we have done younger women a real disservice by discouraging them from lifting weights and building muscle. Because the more muscle you have, the higher your metabolic rate is going to be, even at rest, even when you're just sitting on a couch recording a podcast. And so when women are afraid to add muscle or to lift weights, I think it's harder to do as we age. You can do it. You're living proof of that. I mean, you can definitely change your shape as you age, but I just think I don't know. That's all I'll say for now. I just think that muscle mass is so important, and I have to remind myself of this because I don't like to lift weights. I force myself to do it because I know it's really important, but it's one of those things that I don't like it, but I do it.
The main thing, which of course again in India I've seen, is women being terrified of protein. Terrified, not only afraid but terrified. So this is what something I would like you to address is what is the connection between, they all feel that if we eat a lot of protein we'll become bulky and we'll suddenly, sleep in the morning and tomorrow morning wake up with the kind of bulk muscle mass which they keep, advertising in the gyms and all. So this is the one message I would like you to address, is that how important it is for women to really add protein to their diets. They are,
Yeah,
what's happening in India, that the women become frugal eaters, so they move on to a hypocaloric diet, again a low fat diet and a low protein diet. So actually everything is missing from their diets. They are neither are there macronutrients nor micronutrients. That's a
right,
huge issue.
right. So there's so much misunderstanding about protein in the diet. And it's definitely not true that if you just eat a lot of protein, you're going to become this big hulking mass. I mean, it's difficult to build that kind of physique. You have to work hard. You can't just eat protein and explode. It's not going to happen. I wish, right? I wish that it was that easy. There's also a lot of myths about a high protein intake being harmful for the kidneys or being harmful for the bones. They think it's acidic and it's going to leach calcium from the bones.
Yeah, yes.
All of that is patently false. And I don't know if you talked to Dr. Naiman about that, but he talks about this a lot. It is completely mythical that increased dietary protein is harmful for the kidneys or harmful for the bones. If anything, it's actually the opposite. Your bones are made of protein. They're not just calcium wrapped around nothing. It's minerals and calcium and other minerals wrapped into a protein matrix.
Yes.
And the single most harmful thing for the kidneys isn't protein, it's high blood sugar. And I would say high blood sugar and insulin together is terrible for kidney function. So that aside, I think people don't realize that protein, it's not just muscle tissue. It's your hair, your skin, your nails, your ligaments, your tendons, your bones, enzymes, neurotransmitters, hormones. So many things in the body are made out of protein and amino acids, the building blocks for protein. And if you're not eating enough of it, protein is absolutely essential in the diet, and certain amino acids are essential, meaning you have to eat them. You can't make them inside your own body like you can make certain other things. If you're not getting enough of them, you're going to break down your own tissue to get them. You're going to break down your existing muscle mass. This is part, I think, of why women that just don't eat enough, and especially don't eat enough protein, and this actually, this is a huge problem in India and China right now, what we call the TOFI, thin outside, fat inside.
Absolutely.
Where you have a small shape, but you have almost no muscle mass. You're all body fat. You have no strength. You have no, you're a small person, but it's all just fat.
Yes.
And metabolically, so you might be happy with how you look when you're wearing clothing in front of a mirror, but internally with your health, that's not good. And so it's not necessarily about the weight. You can't look at somebody and say, well, she's thin, she must be healthy, or she's overweight, she must be unhealthy. There's exceptions all along the way.
Absolutely.
And one more thing I'll say about the protein, I think this may not apply to all women, but for many women, a lot of carbohydrate and sugar cravings come because they're not eating enough protein.
Yes.
If they were eating enough protein and filling up and really feeling satisfied, they wouldn't be on that blood sugar roller coaster. They wouldn't be hungry all day trying to reach for sugary snacks.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I think so many of the mental health issues, because again, with menopause, I have seen the two main things which I have seen, at least in India, is depression, a lot of mental ill health, and fibromyalgia. Oh my goodness. And fibromyalgia, I feel, is the cause of the most women attending the outpatient departments in the hospital. And again, do you think it all stems from the same thing, the lack of good quality protein and fat? I mean, both the things linked together.
I think that's a lot of it. I think, depression obviously can be caused by a lot of things, and especially in menopause, the hormonal changes are so extreme that I think that alone can probably contribute to changes in mood. But I think with women, especially if they're avoiding animal foods, I think B12 deficiency, vitamin B12 deficiency is rampant. I think it's everywhere. And I think women are more affected, especially if you're not eating red meat, which I know in India may be prohibited, but you can eat eggs, maybe there's dairy products, pork, poultry, seafood. There's other ways to get these nutrients if you don't eat beef. But I think a B12 deficiency is huge with any kind of fatigue, any kind of mood problem. And I think, even iron deficiency can cause fatigue. So people with fibromyalgia or chronic fatigue, I think a lot of it has to do with some of those micronutrient deficiencies. There might be other things causing it, but those things are probably making it worse, making the problem worse.
Absolutely. And with,
And,
of
and
course,
just before I forget, with women specifically, culturally, I don't know about in India, but in the US, for some reason over the last few decades, culturally, it's almost become unfeminine or unladylike to eat a large piece of meat or to eat a lot of pork or animal food. You know, women are supposed to be totally satisfied with a little bowl of salad and some tomatoes. And it's like more masculine to just eat a big plate of meat, and that's part of the problem, is that women think they're not supposed to eat a lot of meat, or we've been told that a portion size the size of a deck of cards, or about 3 ounces, is enough. It's not enough.
absolutely. I so agree with you. And in fact, once I've got back into eating, we do get good quality mutton here in India. And once I've back to eating mutton, more of the red meat, I can actually feel that kind of satiety and even a better well-being than when I was only having white meat, chicken and fish, because
Yeah.
the satiety and the well-being is pretty much high. But unfortunately, as you just stated, that with so many cultural situations in status in India, and the fact that most of us are vegetarians, this I had also asked Dr. Ted Neiman, and of course he said that vegetarians should ultimately add whey protein in their diet, because there's just no other way where we can contribute to increase protein in the diet. What is your thoughts about for the vegetarians? How do they increase the protein in their diets?
Right. So I think, like, I would agree with when Dr. Naiman says eat as many eggs as you want, just lots and lots of eggs. If you consume things like cottage cheese or Greek yogurt or dairy products that are higher in protein, I think that's okay. I think that supplementing with something like whey protein is fine, but I also think, depending on somebody's health status, they might not need very strict keto. If you can just have a reduced carbohydrate intake, then something like lentils is actually really good, because they're higher in protein, they're higher in fiber. So, and I think, they have a lot of nutrients that, if they're prepared properly, you will absorb some of the iron, some of the zinc. I mean, it's lower than is in animal foods, but if you don't have to have an extremely low carbohydrate intake,
Yes.
eating some of those beans and pulses will give you a little more protein.
Yes, I think that's what vegetarians can never be on a strict keto, and if they're otherwise doing metabolically well, I also see no reason for anybody to be on a strict keto. A low carb with lentils and legumes thrown in is pretty much good, as long as you are trying to avoid grains to quite a certain extent, which is exactly what I myself think. And trying to do that with my women, the women who are trying to ask me for dietary advice. And yes, it is helping, because the moment you feel the strength returning, it's like you've been given new life. The backache disappears, the general feeling of waking up in the morning and just feeling unwell, it is the most miserable feeling possible.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And now let's come to our most favorite topic between the two of us, and that's intermittent fasting. So what is there's a lot of things going on about intermittent fasting, the long fasts, the fast 18/6, 16/8, couple of days fast. What would you feel is the best if you target women per se? What would you think we follow when it comes to intermittent fasting?
Right. I'm so glad we're talking about this, because I think I have a bit of a contrarian perspective on fasting, especially for women. So I don't even like the word fasting unless it is like a multi-day fast. Because if you're only eating 1 meal a day or 2 meals a day, well, first of all, if you're eating 1 or 2 meals a day, are you really fast? Is that fasting? You're eating 2 meals a day. But I also think, for me, fasting implies deliberately avoiding food when you're genuinely, legitimately hungry. You're hungry for food, and it's not just a sugar craving. You're genuinely hungry for good quality food, and you're just saying, no, I'm fasting, I'm just not going to let myself eat. And the thing is, if you're only hungry for 1 or 2 meals a day, then only eat 1 or 2 meals a day. I don't consider that fasting. I consider following your body's natural signals. Like that's what we should all do. I think what I don't like. So here's the thing. Let's start with the positives. I certainly believe that going some extended period of time without eating can be beneficial. But most of the beneficial things that happen when you fast come from a very low carbohydrate intake anyway. Because the main things that happen is the lower blood sugar and the lower insulin, the lower inflammation. Most of that is accomplished through a very low carb or ketogenic diet, even without fasting. Fasting can add a little bit on top of that, especially if you're really having a hard time losing weight or you have a very intractable medical condition that might respond to a longer fast. So I think there are some physical benefits, but the reason I have this contrary opinion about fasting is because I'm starting to see a lot of women with emotional damage from fasting, not from fasting, but they have become afraid to eat. So that when they are legitimately hungry and they need nourishment, they're not letting themselves eat. They have imposed an arbitrary time period. I'm not allowed to eat until 4 p.m. I'm only allowed to eat between 10 and 6. Completely arbitrary rule where if they're not hungry, they'll eat because that's their eating window. Or if they are very, very hungry, they're not going to eat because their eating window hasn't opened yet. Or it's and people have come to believe that it's a binary system. They're either fasting or they're giving themselves cancer. People think that this word autophagy is a very big buzzword now. That's like when you're not eating, your body clears out sort of old, worn out cells and old debris from your body. But that happens all the time. It's not a switch that gets flipped at a certain number of hours of fasting. It happens all the time. When you fast, I would agree that it is upregulated. That clearing out process happens more when your body doesn't have to expend energy digesting and taking care of food. But if autophagy didn't happen all the time, you would never heal from a paper cut or from banging your toe into a table. Anytime you heal from anything, that's your body clearing away the scar tissue and the bruise. So I see a lot of women that have just become very anxious and afraid, and people think they're doing this way of eating wrong if they're not fasting. You don't have to fast. I would say though, you don't have to eat 3 meals a day with snacks. It's I want to tell people to follow their hunger, but it's become so difficult to listen to our natural cues in the modern diet environment. But I'm going to stop talking now. I've said so much, but fasting can be beneficial, but I'm also starting to see people getting very worried and fearful about food and the timing of their food.
Well, I seem to think that that's pretty much true because I have been through that phase where I myself used to literally look at my watch and think that, this is my, and then slowly and steadily over a period of maybe months, I have now learned to be mindful, and I can now understand that is it hunger, or am I just feeling bored, and is it the craving which is hit? But I completely understand. And also one worrisome situation which I'm seeing in our country is that some of us are doing long fasts, and really we are recovering with insulin resistance, and we are losing the body fat. But if we are not doing, number one, we are not taking in a good amount of protein. That is also with long fast. If we are not taking in good amount of protein, and if we are not doing strength training, I am fearing that we might lead into it sarcopenia, which maybe because see these long fasts, I feel that ultimately it's really difficult to sustain. There are few people who will be able to sustain it all through their lives, but it's fine to do for the couple of months. But if you, unless and until you also add your good quality protein and amount of strength training, I'm a little fearful that will it, might it be detrimental also if we lose out on muscle mass?
Yeah, I think this is the reason some people are concerned about extended fasting.
Hmm.
Even the people that don't really support fasting think it's like a 16/8 or a time restriction is fine, but we're
Hmm.
more concerned about the long term. And that's why it's supposed to be fasting and feasting. And if
Feasting,
you're
yeah,
not feasting, if
not
you're
feasting.
fasting and then when you do eat, you're only eating a small amount, and like you said, you're not eating enough protein, that is the big concern, is that you'll lose muscle mass. And for the women, you know, like we said earlier, when you start to lose that muscle mass, that's your metabolic rate. I listen to a gentleman who calls muscle mass metabolic currency,
Hmm.
right? So go to the gym and make a deposit, or do some sit-ups and make a deposit. But when you start to lose that metabolic currency, you're that I
Hmm.
think that contributes also to some of the fat gain as we age. It's not just the hormones, it's because we just naturally become less active too. But that is one of the bigger concerns about the long-term fasting, is that we don't make up for what we might have lost.
And I've also seen a lot of dip in the hunger in some people who do long fasts. What can be the reason behind that? That even when there are periods of feasting, they say we don't feel hungry. And I'm a little surprised because when I'm hungry, I'm really hungry. And when I'm not hungry, then I'm not hungry. So, what can be the cause behind that particular reason that they say that even when we are breaking the fast, we're just not hungry? What can be
You
the
mean
reason behind it?
once they've started eating, or?
Yes, especially for the people who are doing long fast, like 20 hours plus, then they are claiming on saying that we've just lost our appetite. We are not hungry anymore. So,
Well, I think I I can't it surprises me that once they start, I haven't really heard of this much. If
mhm,
once somebody starts eating, I'm surprised that they don't want to keep eating. But it is interesting, Dr. Jason Fong and Megan Ramos mentioned that when you do kind of this extended fasting, you might start to feel hungry, and it gets a little stronger and stronger, but it actually goes away.
mhm,
If you push through that hunger,
mhm,
hunger doesn't increase steadily until you get so hungry that you eat your own arm. It goes away. And so they use the phrase ride the wave, right?
mhm,
It crest and then wait for it to dissipate. So I think it actually is true. If you can tough it out and keep going, your
mhm,
appetite does disappear. I
mhm,
think eventually it'll come back,
mhm,
but I think most people find that the hunger goes away. Not initially. The first few hours, I think it's pretty tough. And even I
mhm,
think if you're doing a multi-day fast, some people say around that 48-hour mark is the hardest. But if
mhm,
you push through, the appetite goes away. But
mhm.
it does surprise me that once they break the fast, I think for me, if I were to break a fast like that, I just want to keep on keep on eating.
I've never tried to do I think my longest fast has been 18 hours because I love working out. And once I'm working out, I'm actually pretty good 16, 18 hours. And I'm
Yeah,
very comfortable with eating on the rest of the time. So,
yeah.
but that's something which I really, I'm a little fearful, especially in the Indian scenario, especially people who are not eating animal meat, fat, because no amount of, if you're just keeping a eating window of 2 hours, no amount of vegetarian protein would be able to give you the kind of amount of protein which you require. So that is definitely a matter of concern. And then that brings me to the other question: is the thyroid health with the women? Do you think
Mm.
these long fasts and all of this, how is it correlated anywhere with the dip in the thyroid? Does the thyroid, for its good functioning, need some amount of carbs to be added? What is the whole role between the thyroid, the intermittent fasting, the carbs? How would you explain it?
Right. I will talk about thyroid, but before I forget, I want to say one more thing about protein.
Mm-hmm.
Because Ted Naiman is one of my favorite people. I've learned so much from him. But you know, when we talk about people eating more protein or eating higher protein, I don't consider that a high protein diet. I consider that a normal protein
Normal.
diet.
Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely.
The
Absolutely.
problem is we were all coming from a low protein diet,
Yes,
right?
yes,
So when
yes.
we increase it, it's not high. That's now we've normalized our protein intake, you know, so that's, I don't,
Actually, that's a
people get,
great idea. I am going to really steal this phrase from you.
that's
And
fine.
next time, that's what I'm going to tell everybody. Well, it's not a high protein; it's a normal protein diet, which is
Yeah. Or it's almost like a low carb diet. Is this a low carb diet or is this a normal carb diet?
absolute. I
Um,
think that's so true.
yeah, but so to the thyroid, man, I see a lot of, and again, I'm not a doctor, but I can recognize in the lab work and the symptoms what somebody is might be dealing with. I see a lot of undiagnosed thyroid problems, or women come to me who know they have a thyroid problem and they're already on medication, but they're not on the right type or the right dose. So they still have all the same signs and symptoms they had before the medicine.
Mm-hmm.
It I'm not sure why thyroid dysfunction is so common, but I find it everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
And that's probably because the people who come to me for help are struggling to lose weight. If it was working and they were doing well, they wouldn't come to me, right? So I'm going to get the people with the extra layers of problems. And so the thyroid hormones set your metabolic rate.
Mm-hmm.
So if your thyroid, either the gland itself or other processes involved in processing these hormones are not where they need to be, everything in the body slows down. And I know about this, unfortunately, from a great deal of personal experience. um, Everything slows down. Your metabolic rate is slow. That's why it's so hard to lose weight, or you start gaining weight with no changes to your diet or exercise. You'll just start gaining weight. um, you can get cold because your body just internally is not even able to generate heat inside. Constipation, hair loss, depression, it's just horrible. And so it's there's a lot of unknown about low carb and keto and thyroid. A lot of people with thyroid problems go on a low carb or ketogenic diet and the problems get better. They go away, they're able to reduce medication or stop medication. For some people that doesn't happen. And there's some debate as to whether a very, very low carbohydrate intake over the long term can cause a thyroid problem.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think it does. There's two issues. Some people will see a decrease in some of the thyroid hormones, but they feel fine. If you feel totally fine and you're not having any signs and symptoms of low thyroid, then it almost doesn't matter what those lab numbers are. If you
Mm-hmm.
feel great, then, you know, Dr. Stephen Phinney, who's one of the world's leading researchers in all this, has speculated, and this is speculation, we don't know for sure, that when your metabolism is adapted to a lower carb intake, you might be more sensitive to that thyroid hormone, so you don't need as much. So it would almost be expected that it would get a little bit lower, and it's no problem as long as you feel well. But for people that don't feel well, and this does happen, I don't think it's the low carb or keto diet that's responsible. What I see sometimes is women simply eating far too little, exercising far too much, and they are inducing it. The body is trying to protect itself. So rather than letting you burn out, it intentionally slows everything down. This is what, you know, some people will call it adrenal fatigue. It could be thyroid dysfunction. I think it's just simply pushing too hard, not resting enough, not replenishing with enough nutrition. So
What is there any role of coconut oil or selenium, adding selenium to the diets of people who are facing thyroid issues?
I don't know that coconut oil would have any effect. Selenium, the only thing I could see it doing is the thyroid gland produces one particular hormone called T4 that has to be converted into the more active, more potent form of thyroid hormone. And that enzyme conversion requires selenium.
Mhm.
But I think for most people, thyroid dysfunction is probably not a selenium deficiency. I mean,
Mhm.
some women, you need iodine to make thyroid hormones. So if you are actually iodine deficient or selenium deficient, then those things can help. But I think most thyroid dysfunction, I don't think it's caused by like acute mineral deficiencies, but some cases probably are, but not, I would say not the majority.
For such women who are having these thyroid issues, what would you suggest specifically about grains? Should we add some a little amount of grains in their diets, or the lentils and the legumes are sufficient enough to give them the carbs and the proteins both?
Well, so there's some debate as to whether people with thyroid issues should eat more carbs. I don't know that they need to. It might be just a caloric issue, that if they just need more food energy in total. But if it is carb, because I know I've heard from certain women that even increasing fat and protein a lot doesn't help. But when they start to add in things like
Mhm.
potatoes or rice, they feel much better.
Mhm.
So I think I would suspect that beans and things like that would be enough. Beans and
Mhm.
starches like potatoes would be enough. But if it's not, then you could probably experiment with small amounts of rice or naan or bread or whatever. But
Mhm.
I don't know what kind of testing is available in India, but it's thyroid testing is so misunderstood because so many doctors will order one or two tests that
Mhm.
aren't really sufficient to show you where the problem is. You
Mhm.
know, because there's the thyroid gland, there's the pituitary, the
Yeah.
hypothalamus, and then your body's tissues that have to do something with the hormone.
Mhm.
And problems can happen at any of those different spots. And unless you know what the problem is, it's hard to address it.
Hmm.
So I don't know if the more advanced comprehensive testing is available there or
Not
not.
really, not really. Or if even if
Uh,
it's available, it's so expensive that it's beyond the reach of the normal population. But
right.
I do find this a bit of a conundrum when it comes to people with thyroid, and I think yes, it is becomes quite a personalized issue. With some people, they are doing really well, and again, I yes, one thing I feel is that exercise, again, strength training. In my personal opinion, uh, people with thyroid issues, if they are doing maybe more of the cardio, like a lot of runners are facing this thyroid shutdown nowadays because of I think the too much of stress, because of the too much of cardio added, whereas the strength training always helps. So I'm trying to encourage people more into focusing on their as you just suggested, muscle building, than to just focus on incessantly doing cardio, because again, that's another huge myth that you are supposed to basically do cardio, and the women are not supposed to do strength training at all. That's such a huge.
They you bring up a really good point about the excessive exercise. I've heard it called famine response hypothyroidism, meaning because you're exercising so much, and especially as women, we're not eating enough, we're not replenishing all of this nutrition that we require to do all this exercise. Your body thinks it's starving, it thinks it's in a famine situation, and in order to protect you, it
Hmm.
slows your metabolic rate so that you don't burn through all of your
Yeah.
tissue. So it's like a self-induced thing, and it's very, very scary for women to have to come back from that, because you have to tell them they need to eat more, and they're so scared to do it. They have to eat more and exercise less, right? It's the opposite of the advice we've heard for so many years.
Absolutely.
But yeah.
In my journey over the years, because I was also always a plump child and a plump adult, I faced this problem about 3 years back where I was training for a marathon. My thyroid just shut down. It was so scary, and all the investigations were haywire, because exactly I was doing the same thing, that I was doing extreme training for the marathon running, and because in order to keep my body weight down so as to run faster, though I was eating protein, yes, I was eating one of those really hypercaloric kind of a diet. it was quite a lesson for me. Yeah. So it is an issue, and I think women, they really face it tough because since the childhood they are facing all these, the body shaming concepts and the all the materialism and the consumerism shoved down their throat. So it's actually very, very difficult. And coming to that is now another very important topic, which at least in India we are facing, is PCOD. Every girl, I think, is being hit by PCOD. Some of them because of obesity, and there are so many of them who are just uh, the toffee kind of children, who are very slim, very thin, and yet facing huge PCOD issues. So this is one huge issue I would like you to talk about, is how to do it, how to tackle those girls who are under eating and having PCOD, and how to tackle those girls who are obese and having PCOD. And of course, there are so many in whom we have been trying to put them on a low carb, fasting, protein, this, that, and the other, but the weight is just not budging.
Mhm.
So these are the couple of pretty terrifying issues which we are seeing in our teenagers.
Yeah. So the PCOD really goes hand in hand with the high insulin, and in some people, the high blood sugar. So PCOD, we call it PCOS in the US. I think we say syndrome, you probably say
Yeah,
disorder or
disease.
something. So
Yeah,
same
yeah,
thing.
yeah.
So if I slip and say PCOS, I'm talking about PCOD for anyone watching.
Absolutely.
Um, it's in most scientific studies and publications, they always use the word association, right? This disease is associated with this thing, associate. I have read several articles on PCOD where they use the word causal. Chronically high insulin is causal in PCOD. It is the cause.
Cause.
Maybe it's not the only cause, but it is the major, major cause.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just like you said, not all girls and women with PCOD are overweight.
Mm-hmm.
Some are. About 50% of women with this
Mm-hmm.
condition are at a normal weight. They're not overweight. But just because they're not overweight doesn't mean they don't have the chronically high insulin. You
Mm-hmm.
can have the chronically high insulin at any body weight. And here's a really important thing too. Chronically high insulin can be independent of high blood glucose.
Mm-hmm.
So you don't have to have diabetes to have the high insulin. And the insulin by itself, even if your blood glucose is normal, the high insulin causes all kinds of issues, including PCOD. So I do think probably the number one most effective intervention for PCOD is a ketogenic diet. And for the people that are really severe, I would recommend starting with strict keto more so than just a more flexible low carb diet. They might be able to transition to slightly more carbs over time, but I would start with strict keto. They're looking at the drug metformin for
Mm-hmm.
PCOD. I don't know if that's used in India or not, but
It
it's a
is.
diabetes drug, and they
Mm-hmm.
give it to women with PCOD.
Mm-hmm.
There's a supplement called inositol that is also very, very helpful for PCOD. Um, but I think it takes time. I think it takes a lot of time to reverse that. But there have been some studies where, if you have heard of Dr. Eric Westman, he
Mm-hmm.
did a pilot study several years back where they had women with PCOD, put them on a ketogenic diet, very strict. Two of the and I think most of these women had tried to conceive a child and failed because of the irregular ovulation and all that. Two of the women in the study got pregnant on
Mm-hmm.
the ketogenic diet. So
So, for what is the amount of carbohydrates you would suggest to keep at below which level, and what is the amount of protein or fat ratio which we should be giving to the girls who are obese? Because it's a struggle with such children. It's such a struggle. They sometimes work hard, but it's just that stall. The weight doesn't go down at all, and
yeah,
it's a
it
whole
has to
rebound vicious cycle which happens then with them.
yeah. I think it has to be very strict if somebody's not responding, at first. So the Dr. Westman study was 20 total grams of carbohydrate, very, very low. So it's really only room for like 2 or 3 cups of vegetables a day. And I made a fist because he tells people you don't have to measure it, just make it the portion about the size of your fist. So it has to be very strict. I don't know if everyone probably doesn't have to be quite that strict. I would say under 50 total carbs
Total, which
as
includes
a maximum,
vegetables.
and probably 30 is even better. And then I don't really believe in ratios. I don't believe in saying, well, 70% fat, 5% carbs. I prefer to go by grams. And I
Mm.
think as long as you keep the total carbohydrate grams very, very low, the
Mm.
fat and protein, I don't think you really have to measure it. I think just eat the
Just
foods the way they occur. So if you eat a piece of lamb, you
mm.
don't have to cut the fat off, but you don't have to add extra
Fat.
fat to it. You don't have to put
Mm.
olive oil on it or something. If you're eating eggs, you can cook them in butter or ghee, but you don't have to add lots and lots of extra.
Mm.
I do think so. I kind of recommend the same approach for women with PCOD who are overweight or obese and those who are not. It's just
Mhm.
those who are not overweight or obese can eat more fat while keeping the carbohydrate level very, very low for both. The
Mm.
women that are not trying to lose weight can just eat more food as long as it's very low in carbohydrate.
Absolutely. And actually, this whole, you are very, very true because with all these keto snacks and keto desserts and all of these things coming in, it's another getting to be very difficult for the teenagers who are trying to lose weight, the obese teenagers, because Instagram and social media is flooded with these keto desserts where they're just making things out of cream and some chocolate and some keto bombs and some fat bombs. I think that is where, what do you think, is that the issue in PCOD where the weight stall happens?
I think that that kind of stuff can definitely get in the way of weight loss, and not just for PCOD, for anyone. Those sort of almond flour and keto cookies and keto cake.
Hmm. Hmm.
Some people can have that and still lose weight, no problem. Some people can't.
Hmm.
So, just because something says it's keto doesn't mean it's suitable, especially if they're made with sugar alcohols, things like
Hmm.
mannitol, maltitol, xylitol. Some of those sugar alcohols do affect blood glucose and insulin, and people respond differently to them. But if your body responds pretty significantly, then that can definitely get in the way. I do think if somebody thinks they're doing a ketogenic or very low carb diet and they have PCOD and it's not getting any better, they just have to really examine exactly what they eat, because they probably just need to get really strict and maybe eliminate all of that packaged processed stuff
Hmm.
and just eat eggs, meat, seafood, very low carb vegetables, and it's hard. I mean, for a young girl, it's hard. So either the whole family has to be on board, or someone else in the household, or maybe a group of friends. It's very hard to do it by yourself when you're young. There's a lot of your friends want to go out for pizza or they want to go out to the movies. It's hard.
It's
It's
very,
hard enough to do as an adult when you really want to, let alone when you're younger and none of your friends are doing it.
it's really hard. It's really hard. And unfortunately, it's hitting so badly. The infertility is going up so much, and of course it's the whole combination of the girls facing PCOD and the men facing their belly fat and their estrogen levels all going through the roof. It's just getting so scary. And of course the women face it a little worse with all the body shaming thing coming, which is there. So they just tend to go on those starvation diets, and then it's just just goes into a complete vicious cycle. It just never ends. And this is something which I'm very, very troubled by all of this, because at the end I think that deep rooted insecurity steps in, and the body image, the positivity, it just culminates into a pretty much difficult scenario. It just
Yeah, and some women come to me. People have very distorted body images.
Mm.
Some women come to me, ask me for my help losing weight, and they're underweight already. And
Absolutely.
I refer them out. I said, this is not healthy. I can't help you lose more weight.
Hmm.
You've got a woman this big and she looks in the mirror and sees a woman this big. And
Hmm.
so I think like in my ebook, The Stall Slayer, I have a whole chapter on setting realistic expectations.
Hmm.
Are you trying to lose more weight when you're already at a perfectly healthy weight?
Hmm.
If we're, for so many, like this could be me right now that I'm
Hmm.
describing. I could stand to lose about 10 pounds right now, but the extra weight I'm carrying isn't really impacting my health or my
Hmm.
mobility or you know, it's not stopping me from doing anything physical that I would want to do.
Absolutely.
It's purely aesthetic. I'd like to lose a few more pounds, but I think that's something that we women have to really get better at accepting too. Maybe I'm not meant to be super, super skinny, but
Hmm.
you can be healthy, you can be fit, and but I mean that's different than if you are carrying excess weight to the point that it is affecting your mobility and your health and your independence, even if you can't really get around.
Yes, absolutely. I completely believe, and that's what I also try to encourage most of my women patients is if your investigations and all your parameters and your fitness level and your productivity is pretty much good, then do not bother about those extra couple of kgs here and there, because at the end of it, it's the health we are talking about. The weight loss is just the byproduct, as you said. And when it comes to all those keto snacks, I just love what you always say is that real people need to eat real food. And now the whole keto world also has been invaded by the whole junk food industry. It will
Uh,
just not leave us alone.
yeah,
It's
and I think those things are okay as a treat once in a while,
hmm.
but like a keto treat should be just like a regular treat. It's every now and then. It's not something you have 3 times a day. So
No, and the scariest thing, Amy, which I'm seeing is that the sugar alcohols, some sneaked in carbohydrates are completely hidden unless and until you know how to read the labels. On top of it, it will be written keto. It will be keto friendly, and then it will be high protein. And my clients will say, "Oh well, this is something great I found. Can we eat it?" And then I say, "Please show me the label." And I'm like, "Oh my goodness." So
yeah,
this junk food industry is not going to leave us alone till it completely destroys everybody's health. It's just
yeah. I think, I don't know what's happened in India over the last few years or decades, but in America, just home cooking is a lost art. People just
yes,
don't cook anymore.
absolutely.
I love to cook, so it's not an issue, but I think it's easier for people to just reach for something that's prepared.
I feel the same because even in India now with the newer generation, somehow either they are going overboard by cooking too much, and that too completely nutritionally not very good food, or they are just not cooking at all. So I completely agree. I love to cook myself, and I keep experimenting with
Yeah,
whatever whatever I can lay my hands on. And nothing like home cooked food. At least you know what you're putting in your food, right? So that's I completely believe in that as well. And when it comes to the whole again, a lot of women are complaining of migraine.
mm,
uh, so I've seen a lot of your tweets about migraine, and it's another huge issue. And somehow it is always connected with the fact that because we didn't have some sugary thing, or the because our carbs went low, it's always like that the blood people will be saying our blood glucose dipped because we didn't have sort of some carbohydrates from breakfast, or we forgot to eat and our blood glucose dipped and we started having a migraine. So what exactly is it all about, this whole migraine thing? It's all the time doing the rounds.
right. So migraine, a lot of different things cause migraine. Some people get it when there's a change in the atmospheric pressure. Some people, different like scent, like candles or perfume can trigger a migraine, or different sensitivities to chemicals. But for a lot of people, it is rapid fluctuations in blood glucose or insulin can trigger a migraine. And so keto is very effective. It doesn't work for everybody, but a lot of people find that a very, very low carb diet is really good for migraines. But people with migraines, very often the keto diet alone is not enough. They have to be very, very diligent about getting a lot more sodium and a lot more magnesium. So I'll send you a link when we're done. There's a woman named Angela Stanton who's
Mm-hmm.
kind of well known in the low carb world. She's a migraine specialist,
Mm-hmm.
and she developed a protocol. She's helped, hundreds of people. And this is what she does. It's a very, very low carb diet, but it's also very careful about electrolyte supplementation. But with regard to the blood sugar, causing a migraine, it's like hypoglycemia, just whoa, having really low blood sugar and you get irritable and shaky. Some people, that can trigger a migraine. But the problem isn't that you need more sugar. The problem is you ate too much carbohydrate previously, and your insulin, like your blood sugar went up. So the insulin went up to control that, but the insulin goes up so high that it crashes the blood sugar down very quickly, and that big rapid change can trigger a migraine. So for many people, just evening out that blood sugar is enough. So some people have to do a little more, like I said, with the electrolytes. But like, this is what I said earlier, keto is so helpful for so many things. Like, weight loss is great, but migraines, type 2 diabetes, PCOD, erectile dysfunction, all of these things. And it's amazing. And it's just food. It's just a diet.
Totally. And again, as you said, that is actually a normal diet. It's just that I keep telling all our the Indian community is that it's about a balanced diet. I'm only asking you to eat balanced amount of protein and fat, whereas in your plate, all I can see is carbohydrates. So I'm going to really, keep it under lock and key what you said. And I'm going to focus on this. And whenever somebody asks me, am I going to take high protein? I'll be saying, oh no, it's normal protein which you need to have. Because absolutely, we are we are just, and there's this whole myth, I don't know from where it started, that we are supposed to eat every 2 hourly. So people wake up and start eating, and then they keep eating, and then they keep feeling hungry.
Well, when you're on a high carb diet, you have to eat every 2 or 3 hours because you start to feel that low. So,
absolutely. And
I mean, it's one of the miraculous things is that I have a friend named Christy. She's actually pretty well known. Her name is Christy Sullivan. She does a lot of cooking videos, so people might know who she is. One of the things that she said, she has had morbid obesity for most of her life, even since she was a child. And she found keto, I think maybe she was in her mid 40s or late 40s or so. And she said that within the second or third day of adopting the keto diet, she said, for the first time in my life, I wasn't hungry. It's just so good. And it's not that you never, ever get hungry on a ketogenic diet, but it's a very pleasant sensation of just like, oh, I think I need some food. It's not this urgent, desperate need to like eat something immediately. Like that's that low blood sugar.
Absolutely.
Yeah, this is I'm not saying that this is a miracle diet that fixes everything for everybody, but it's close. It's so powerful and so remarkable what it can do.
Absolutely. And what about this omega-3, omega-6, the ratio imbalance, which is creating again so much of health hazards and havoc in women? Why are we having this imbalance? From where did this whole imbalance come? And again, pertaining to the Indian lifestyle, especially because we are hardly eating fatty fish out here. What should we do to improve this ratio of omega-3 and 6?
Right. Again, I kind of have a contrary opinion to most people in the low carb world. I'm not very fearful of omega-6 oils. You'll as a general rule, omega-3 fats are anti-inflammatory and omega-6 are more inflammatory, but there are anti-inflammatory forms of omega-6, it's not totally black and white. I think our diet, we're always, evolutionarily, we always consumed a little bit more omega-6 than 3. So it's not supposed to necessarily be equal, but because of the modern food supply, we have just multiple times more omega-6 than 3 now. And most of that comes from soybean oil, corn oil, safflower oil, sunflower oil, all of these, what they call industrial seed oils. Most people call them vegetable oils, but they're not really from vegetables, are they? um, and so we use these oils to cook. They're in salad dressings. They're also in a lot of the packaged foods that people rely on. It's in the bread, it's in the cakes, the crackers. It's in almost everything, at least in the US, it's everywhere. And it's not that this is necessarily bad for you. It's just that we're eating so much more of it than we ever did in human history before. And I think that skewed ratio can be exacerbating some of the metabolic problems, but all of the research pointing to this ratio being harmful has been done in people eating a high carb diet. None of this research has been conducted in people on a very low carb diet. And I want this way of eating to be accessible to anyone who wants to try it. And if we say, okay, not only do you now have to stop eating your rice and your naan and your potatoes and your everything you've eaten your whole life, you also now have to make all your salad dressing at home from avocado oil, or you also have to get rid of all this other stuff. It's too difficult. It's too high a barrier. And frankly, there are so many people that do a low carb or keto diet and completely reverse all the health problems. They lose 100 pounds. They reverse type 2 diabetes. They reverse PCOD while including those oils in their diet, but they just kept the carbs really low. So I think the inflammatory state of the body is very different when you have a very low carb intake as opposed to when you combine those oils with a very high carb intake. Because if you look back at history, Gary Taubes, he wrote his book called The Case Against Sugar, is so great. And these type 2 diabetes, hypertension, gout, obesity, all of these things go back hundreds of years. Now, they were rare, but they existed. And what did not exist at that time was the soybean oil and the canola oil. I mean, not the canola, the cottonseed. Those oils didn't exist, but what did exist back then was sugar. These problems can go away if you just get rid of the sugar and most of the starchy carbs. Now, I'm not saying that people should live on these high omega-6 oils, but I'm just not I think the more important factor is controlling the carbohydrate intake. If you want to go to the next level after that, start eating more omega-3 and cut back on the 6. And I almost forgot your question. How do you actually do that? You could eat more fatty fish, but I think that ratio will balance a little bit naturally by just cutting way back on the 6. By cutting back on the 6, that ratio automatically improves even if you don't eat more 3.
I agree. Absolutely. Though I'm trying to do away with the vegetable oil, with the seed oils, and mostly, and you, of course, you must be knowing, because in the Indian culture, we were always eating ghee. And
ghee is perfect. Like that's what I would say for the number one fat. Eat ghee.
Yes, and suddenly one fine day we were told not to eat ghee, and we were told to eat all these seed oils. And I think in India, what I have observed is rapid deterioration of health in the past 60, 70 years, when all the packaged and junk food suddenly made its way, and we completely stopped eating ghee. I remember in my parents' house, we were eating ghee all the time, and my father had his first heart attack at the age of 45, and he was never told to stop eating his bread, and he was never told to stop having sugar. He was never told to add strength training. He was told to stop having his eggs. He was told to stop having his mutton. He was told to stop having his ghee. And then poor gentleman, he suffered his second heart attack. He suffered his third heart attack. And now at the age of almost, when they are 80, my parents, they have included all these things back in their diet, and they're feeling pretty good about it.
Good for them. Oh, I'm so sorry he had to go through so much.
Being a doctor himself, Amy, he's a doctor himself, but it's actually, I don't know whether to laugh or to be so sad about this whole situation, but
Well, unfortunately, you can blame the United States for that. I mean, we had terrible dietary advice and we exported that to the whole rest of the world.
absolutely.
It's our fault.
But at least it's great that thanks to now all of you who have been changing the conventional dietary guidelines and making such a hue and cry about it, we are all trying to follow the same thing, and it'll take us a while to convince the doctors. That's the something which is, I'm finding it very tough, and there are very very few doctors who are convinced and who are doing, and I would be very happy to, if I could, invite a couple of them and share there's some insights with you. And also I would like to introduce Pratik, who's my technical wizard, who's the back end behind all these webinars, and he's the invisible person who's enabling us to do all this health awareness so selflessly. So thank you, Pratik. As usual, it's very very kind of you. So I think we've really really taken so much of your time, Amy. I'm indeed so grateful to have you, because uh, India is sitting on such a ticking time bomb, and we are really facing such terrible terrible health issues. And this is, of course, all the people who have attended this today, and then later on I'll be making it live from my YouTube. I'll be sharing it with you as well,
Yeah,
and
great.
it's going to benefit so many people around in our country, and all of us. That's the vision all of us have, is to ultimately bring about some amount of health awareness so that people lead a healthy, productive life. So I'm so grateful. I'm so thankful to have you here with me, with all of us. And if one take-home message you could just share with us, I would be so happy and grateful for that.
Yeah, I think, well, first of all, thank you for having me. I've been honored to be here and to be interacting with doctors. I mean, I'm just a nutritionist, like this is great. But my main point to people is keep it simple, especially if you're new to this,
Hmm.
because there's so much information out there and people saying all kinds of different things. The most important thing for you to do and the place to start is to just cut way back on your carbohydrates.
Hmm.
You worry about the other stuff later. Just get used to eating much less carbohydrate. That's the most effective and most powerful thing. All the other stuff can help beyond that, but the place to start and the place to focus is your low carbs.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. And it's really been wonderful. We've really picked your brain and tried to extract whatever little information we could take from you. And I think it's been such a learning experience for all of us. We've learned such good things for you, and really grateful. Thank you from all India for taking out your time for us. And do have a great weekend ahead. It's
Thank you. Thanks for spending your evening with me, everybody watching.
No, we had a great time with you. We had a great time with you. Thank you so much. And
Okay.
thank you. Goodbye.
All right.
Thank you again.
Take care. Bye-bye.
And this is Namaste from India. Bye.